Hi, welcome to Meet Me at the Movies. I am Noel T. Manning II. Appreciate you spending time with us as always. We always know you could have other things to do, but when you take the time to be with us, we always want to make it worth your while. And today we're going to make it worth our while and yours. Chad Faust is with us. Chad is going to be talking to us about a new film called Girl. And Chad, this is a film you've got your fingerprints on this just a little bit. You are writer, director, and you're starring in this. You're producing as well. Is that correct?
I'm not a producer on it. No, I drew the line.
But I got everything else right. Writer, director, and starring in this as well.
Yeah, it's true. I did actually produce a few of the songs in the soundtrack. Actually, I don't know if that counts.
Yeah, it counts. It absolutely counts. Well, we'll check. Before we dive into a lot about this movie, Girl, I'd love to get some background on how you got involved in filmmaking, where that love came from, and why is it that you felt like this is something you wanted to do?
Yeah, honestly, I was as a teenager and getting into so much trouble doing stupid things, and it was that thing where you had to affect the world in some way, and it was either I was going to destroy things or create things, and thankfully, I made that transition from destruction to creation. And I was so fortunate. My high school had this great career preparation program called Video Arts, and at age 15, I just started making movies, and then off it went. And I think the power of a story is, I almost fell out of it for a while. I wanted to go into journalism because I thought I could do better, more good with that. And then I discovered that, I think sometimes the greatest way to change people's hearts is through taking them on an emotional story. A friend of mine when I was growing up got freedom tattooed on his arm after watching Braveheart, and it spoke to him so greatly that he just maimed his arm. But I wanted to affect people in that same way.
I think the power of story, as you mentioned, is so important because there's so many things that we can provide to people through the power of story. I've always talked to friends and family, and when I think back about those family narratives, so many of them are connected to stories, and I appreciate you sharing that. Are there stories that have resonated with you over the years that have provided you this kind of background for creating on your own?
I think if anything, it's the story of stories that really grabs me, is how powerful they are. And I was in Russia like 3 years ago, and I did the Trans-Siberian Railway trip from St. Petersburg to Vladivostok, and met so many interesting people along the way. And I was so taken by how profound the story of World War II is still in that country, to the point where other passengers on the train would talk to me about it with tears in their eyes about how proud they were of their own country's heroism, like in their grandfather's generation. I was just shocked. And this is still pulsing through that country. And what if they had discovered that it was all not true? And that was sort of the thing I was most fascinated by, is we can build our whole lives on a narrative, and then one day you discover that, oh my God, it's not a true story. It's actually made up, and it's actually almost the opposite of what I thought. And I've been fighting for the wrong uh with for passion for the wrong narrative. And I've had those moments in my own life when I woke up, my philosophies got completely challenged and reversed, and then you're lost for a moment, and then you kind of get humbled and therefore have compassion for the people. And I think it's a good thing to happen, that happens to us when we read our stories.
Yeah, and let's dive into the film Girl.
Mhm.
There is a film about family stories. It's about
Mhm.
uh, revisiting a past that maybe you're uncovering some things. As you were just talking about, those elements of the stories of the past may not be exactly what you think they were or what remember. That's exactly what's happening in this film Girl. Somebody that goes back to a hometown, hasn't been there since what, she was 6 years old, and she's a young adult now, or and trying to uncover some secrets and really reconfront a past that she thought she knew, but she discovers something a little different along the way. Where did the idea for this story of family, of revenge, of greed, and trying to uncover those secrets of the past come from?
Yeah, I mean, part of it was, you know, I think my parents divorced right after I, and I always felt like I had to choose between them, you know, and I wanted to sort of take that psychology, I guess that emotional tear, and physicalize it into a more, you know, story of the world, you know. And so this woman was obviously had been believing one of her parents' story, and then starts to get torn between them. And I think a lot of us, especially, you know, I think we're all sort of in this binary choice between our father or our mother on some level, and hopefully there's a third choice that emerges that is something
I'm not coming on my laptop.
authentically you. And I think that, you know, the story ultimately then is the story of identity, you know, like who am I if I'm not left or right, you know? Where does that put me, you know? So, and that's something that really grabbed me, and that actually drove every visual choice. It's like who. That's why I did so many reflection shots and stuff. Like in the opening shot is her own reflection as she looks out into the world. You see her face, and it's like, who am I in this world?
Absolutely loved that, and I loved a lot of different aspects of this film. I loved the locations. We'll get to talk a little bit about the locations in a little bit. The cinematography, the choices in those particular shots, like that opening shot you were talking about, the editing. Really, in so many ways, I've always felt that editing is kind of the unsung hero of so many stories and so many films, and all of that really connected and clicked here, as well as the action sequences with Bella Thorne. I want to mention Bella Thorne as well, Mickey Rourke and yourself, all three starring in this. Uh, I was taken by Bella's character going and finding this town that she thought she knew what it was like, and it was a ghost town. And I think to me that resonated because she was living with these ghosts of the past that she didn't really quite understand, and yet she's in this town trying to explore, how do I move forward, and where do I go from here. I know the choice I want to make, but I also know if I make that choice, it will change everything from this point on. uh, Starring in a film that you have written and you're directing, that's got to be a challenge. You were talking earlier about Mel Gibson and Braveheart. He did it in Braveheart.
That's true. Yeah.
And man, it's got to be an incredible challenge to do all three of those things. And talk a little bit about that, if you would, about wearing those multiple hats for this and why you chose to do that.
Yeah. So many things you said there I would love to talk about, but your last point. Yeah, part of that was, you know, one, you know, that character I think could have been easily become one thing. You know, he could have just been the sort of villain character, or the, you know, the sort of likable, you know, screw up. And I really wanted him to be this wild cocktail of mercuriality, and you know, to never quite know where he's coming from, and even like hopefully maybe even like have mixed feelings when, you know, when you're about you know, when things sort of turn dark, you know. And so, you know, and also, you know, I wanted to be able to, I love being able to direct from inside the scene. It's, for me, it's so natural after, you know, I get to be in the fabric and the DNA of the piece, and sort of guiding things on a rhythmic level. For me, it's so natural. A lot of other actor directors I know, it's just not how they're made. It's not something that they would ever want to do. But I think there's some, like, you know, someone like Ben Affleck. I think, you know, he's a better actor when he directs, you know, and I think he's a better director when he acts, you know. And I think there's the two, you know, John Patrick Shanley has this great quote. He said, "Acting is writing, is directing, is living your life."
Yeah.
And I've always kind of lived by that. Like, it's not that different for me. It's like I'm in the story one way or another.
Yeah.
I'd be thinking the same way if I was a production designer or an editor. You know, it's all the same world. And so for me, it's so fluid. It's natural. You know.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the crew that did help bring this together. And I had mentioned the editing and the camera choices and locations. Give some shout outs, if you would, to some of those behind the scenes that
Mm-hmm.
people don't sit through the credits. And I do every single time
Good.
kids
Yeah.
to do the same thing because it's so important.
Yes. Oh man, this film should have failed terribly. We were a non-union film. in Canada where the crews were so limited. It was only because I would die at every corner just to make sure we found the right people. And I was so lucky to find the cinematographer, Christopher Bonnell, who I took, a risk on. He had never made a film before. I don't even know if he had done short films. He was a commercial, he was a commercial guy, but one of the top. And he was like, I don't know, 30 years old.
Wow.
And I'd only been shooting for like 5 years. And I was looking at, I probably looked at 100 reels, and we could only get a non-union guy in Ontario. I was like, I'm like, there was like 6 of them. And I just saw something in his work, and I took a risk. I just knew I had to go with him, and it was one of the best choices I made. He's a beast on his feet. Like most of those were like 10-minute setups because we only had 15 days to shoot.
Wow.
And he became a collaborator, hopefully for life, and he's just a solid guy. And we actually had different visions for the movie, which was, at first I was like, oh no, he wants to, like, I wanted this to be much rougher and raw and more handheld and chaotic, and he's like, no, let's put this on sticks more, and let's let the the handheld shots have more contradiction, they'll stand out more if it's not happening all the time, and he pushed back for like a first timer. I was like, God, you got some cojones, brother. Let's do it. So he was a great collaborator, and challenged me a lot, which was so useful. And then the editor also, I think it was her second feature, Gloria Tong, who, again, the thing I liked about her is her reel was just very classically edited, which I prefer. Like, I don't like it. I don't want to feel the editing. I want to feel the characters.
Right.
And she had that going on really, really well. And then when I met her, she just, like, as she was talking about the script, she had like tears in her eyes. I told her, I said, first of all, you're hired. Secondly, I want you to edit the movie the way you just described it to me. I want you to edit with this feeling in mind, because you get the movie. And I had worked on this movie called Billionaire Boys Club. It was like before Kevin Spacey, kind of everything happened, with him. And it was his last kind of movie, anyways, we were in the editing room for a year on it. I was brought in post-production to kind of re-edit the movie and write all the reshoots and stuff. And it was just the movie was never going to really work. But through that process, I worked with like Academy Award winning editors, and we were just trying to fix the movie, and nobody could fix it except one person who started to fix certain scenes. The movie, I think, just the spine was broken, but this one woman, assistant editor, we gave her a couple of scenes, and she actually liked the movie, where no one else really did, and she liked it, and so that's why she was able to crack certain scenes. And it's like, oh, I learned something there. Your editor has to love the movie, and I loved how she had read the script, and so that was sort of where that decision came from, and and also just being like, it was a female story, and I was me, and and mostly male producers. It's just where it landed. I needed that female mind, and female creativity and understanding, to be, obviously like, as you said, like, films are born or killed in the editing room, and I think Gloria is a big reason why this movie works.
Yeah, it really does work, and you talk about being a movie about a woman in search of something, and talk about the casting, and Bella Thorne. What an amazing talent, and this particular role really did work for her. It felt like it was almost written for her, because she was dynamic in so many of the scenes. So I was really impressed with that as well.
Yeah, she from the moment we met, I just knew that it was going to change the way I made the movie. I had always imagined, like Elle Fanning or somebody like this, and that would have been a creation of the character rather than an unveiling of one's, soul, which is what we did here. Is we really kind of bared who Bella, is inside of her heart. I mean, she's got this very unique public persona, but when you hang out with her, you realize this is more who she is. She's wrestling with a big calling, and she's also wrestling with her history to answer it. And I really was grabbed by her courage and her honesty about the whole thing. And so, and that's actually what brought me to wanting Mickey for it, because I think Mickey lives on a very big canvas as well, and is wrestling a lot of, internal struggles. And because of that, I just wanted to bring these people to it. And it changed the way I did everything. You know, it was less stylized. It was more stripped and raw, and you know, getting into these who these people were.
Well, you mentioned the word raw, and that was exactly what came to mind for me as I was watching the film Girl. Is it was raw and it was authentic, and that is a difficult thing, I think, to do, especially when you talk about only having a short schedule, 15 days to shoot this. How much time did you have in prep with the cast before then?
Yeah, well, with Mickey, I had zero. In fact, I couldn't even get on a phone call with him before. But with Bella, we had actually known each other for about 4 years at this point. You know, I'd met her when the movie was in a different incarnation, and then once I teamed up with these producers, I found her again. So, you know, with her, we had a lot of conversations, and actually that was where most of our preparation, because, you know, with 15-day shoot, I didn't have time to make a lot of adjustments. You know, it was like 2 takes and moving
Wow.
on. So a lot of it was just kind of empowering her to bring who she was, and like giving her the authority. And one of the things that I was quickly realized, it was humbling, is that she knew the character more than I did. And
Wow.
so I kept giving her that, you know, just like, look, I know this story, but you know this person,
Yeah.
you know, and let's come at it from those 2 places. And because of that, we'll be stronger, you know? So we trusted each other in that way.
Yeah, well, there were 2 quotes that really stood out to me, and the one does go back to family, and it says, "You are what you are," ancestry, and
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that but that but that does not determine where you're going to go. But it is part of you. It is part of the roots that you have and that background that you have. But you do have choices to make along the way. And there was another quote that kind of tied into it, that this is a revenge story in certain ways. And the quote was, "The only good revenge is living a good life." And to me, those 2 work well together. You know, you could take out the revenge part of it, but the choice of living a good life is something that I think is very strong and resonated with this, because that is a decision and a choice that has to be made by the lead character played by Bella. But I think everybody has the choice to make, and not all of them make good choices in this film.
Yes, exactly. And I think you nailed it, you know, and I think choice is what we are. You know, we are choice creatures. You know, we either, you know, and if we choose not to choose, that's, you know, we're still choosing. So I think that's, you know, most writers, I think, have to wrestle with the fact that, okay, I have to put my characters into moments of choice. It's how we define who we are. And so I was almost embracing that philosophy on screen rather than, like, you know, behind it. So yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that.
Yeah, this film is one that I think anybody who is drawn to tales of family, tales of challenges, and tales of looking for what is in the past that doesn't have to define me. I think all of those things can kind of resonate with this. I know we're close to running out of time, but I want to make sure that you have a chance to share any other thoughts about Girl that you want to before we wrap up.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, it's just it's exciting that it's, you know, coming out. It's obviously coming out in a very strange year, but I mean, also hopefully a year where it actually, I think, has some thematic relevance. I mean, I was very inspired by the American film of the 1970s, where people were wrestling with this, you know, the what felt like a lot of mistruths, you know, and those films really speak to me. And I was sort of paying homage to them with this film, and suddenly we seem to be repeating history. We don't know what's true anymore. We're living in the age of misinformation once again, but like on steroids with the internet. So it's such a, I think this woman is wrestling with her own narrative and going, is, you know, what is true, what is fake, who do I believe? Do I believe this person or that person? And you know, so I think in some strange way, it's even though I wrote this, I think, like 10 years ago,
Wow.
it's, I think, become wildly relevant in the year that it's coming out.
Yeah, I did feel like this was a throwback to those revenge action thrillers of the 70s. And I even wrote that down. So it's interesting to bring that up, because where I live, there's an independent filmmaker who was known for doing these kinds of action revenge films called Earl Owensby, independent filmmaker, and got to bring James Cameron to this area. But as I was watching it, I could not help but think about those types of films and those types of stories. And what's amazing to me is they still speak volumes. They speak volumes. There are these stories that you can't silence because there is so much authenticity in them. You can go next door and bump into somebody who has gone through similarities of what we've seen within this particular story. So thanks for bringing this story to life.
Thank you.
And thanks for allowing us to experience it. And man, you've got an amazing future ahead of you, writing and starting.
Thanks, Noel.
I'm real excited to see what you've got down the road. And I do want to ask one quick question. You said 15 days. Where was this shot? Was it Ontario?
Yeah, it was in Sudbury, Ontario, which is about 4 hours north of Toronto.
Okay, great locations. And the ghost town. Tell me about this little ghost town that it was shot in.
Yeah, well, oh gosh, that was the hardest thing about this film, is that I heard Northern Ontario and I thought, oh, it's gonna be like the time I spent in, up in the Arctic Circle, and like these small broken towns that are like fighting the snow and all the wood's rotten. I was like, oh, it's gonna be perfect. And I got there, and the Sudburyans had way more self-respect than I had anticipated. Especially there's rural, urban decay, but as soon as you went rural, it was like people had just great respect for their homes. And I was like, yeah, I almost switched it and made it more of like a Pennsylvania steel town, like Deer Hunter or something like this. But it just didn't quite work. Like Mickey Rourke, I loved the idea of him being a more of a rural sheriff, and there's so many reasons I had to keep it the way it was. And I had these amazing production designer Alexis Dabad and art director Dave Morris, who just worked tirelessly to make that ghost town what it was. And the town actually where we shot the main street was this place called Capriol. And I mean, it was tough though, because Canada loves like hanging potted plants.
Yeah.
They love sidewalks, and I was like, I just need a town without sidewalks. I want gravel on the side of the road. Like, I don't like, there's no chamber of commerce in this movie, like there's can't, so we had to go in there with like chunks of gravel and like hide all the parking lines and take all the plots down and like board up windows. And we did a lot to make that what it was. It's a very nice, Canada is a very nice country.
That opening or that scene where Mickey and Bella first meet. She's just walking and it looks like this kind of path, and he drives by and is like, wow, there's no road there. There's no road there.
You know what that is? That's a ski chalet in the background that we turned into a church. And if you flip the world around, you would see these like what do you call them? Chairlifts going up the mountain. So he's actually driving at the base of a ski hill. That's how creative we had to get to make it work.
Well, it really worked, and congrats to everybody who was involved. Man, I'm truly impressed, and you even become more impressed when you realize the tight schedule that you had to pull something like this off. Because to make any movie work, it takes time, talent, and a heck of a lot of good luck.
Sure does, man. Sure does.
Congrats, Chad Faust.
Thank you so much, Noel. Appreciate it.
Here, the movies. The film is Girl, and you can check it out now. And Chad, if anybody wanted to follow your work, what's the best way they could do that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram. It's like at Chad Fausty Faust. That's where, and I'm kind of starting to release things now. And I'm starting to put together my next film right now. It's called Ballistic, and it's about a father who works at an ammunition manufacturing company who finds out he made the bullet that killed his son.
Wow.
So it's a wild story, and based on a lot of true evidence that like 33% of the lead that comes back in our soldiers is American made. And it's not necessarily like a political story, but it's really just about how we put things into the world and everything comes back, nothing goes to outer space, and so it's that people can keep an eye out for that one coming down the road.
Awesome. Chad, thanks for your time, man. Good to see you. Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Noel. Yeah, likewise, mate. Yeah, God bless you, brother. Thank you.
Healthy. Until next time, I'm Noel Manning from Meet Me at the Movies. And for this week, that's a wrap. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Noel. Take care of yourself, buddy.